Yo, what's going on, people? What's going on? This is your boy, Luciann Sugar Ray Marston, host of the Sugar Ray Show. We are here with another wonderful episode with an esteemed guest, super special, super dear to myself and so many others all around the world, man. Miss Luciann, 2Feathers, Berrios, peace and love, peace and love, peace and love. Um, Before we get into her and how she's doing and all of the things related to her and her work, let me tell you a little bit about who she is, what she does, and why we're interviewing her. Right? Let's get into her bio. Luciann Berrios, aka 2Feathers, is a six-time published poet, women empowerment advocate, Reiki master, internationally certified meditation guide, and sound practitioner. She has studied under the guidance of renowned practitioner Jackie Cantwell, who is a resident of the Deepak Chopra Global, George McPherson of Sound of the Times, recording artist and sound practitioner Luna May, sound practitioner Linda Arnold, co-founders of A Warehouse, sound therapist Devi Mambuka, and more. She is the chair of a Puerto Rico-based wellness center for battered women, Women in Need PR. She facilitates sound meditations not only for group sessions, but also private one-on-one sessions, as well as for a community grief support group in Queensbridge called Together We Heal. As someone from the Latin and indigenous culture, music and sound is one of the staples of our communities. So it's her hope and vision to bring these types of healing modalities to Black and Brown communities and cultures that don't necessarily feel welcomed into westernized wellness spaces. She is registered with and accredited by Meditation Alliance International. You've
Yes.
done a lot. You do a lot. You hold a lot. You wear a lot. Let's get into how are you today? How's the day going? How you feeling? What's happening?
The day is fantastic. I had beautiful company earlier today.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of self-care after that, which I think is incredibly important, especially in our busy lives when we live in major cities like this. So I'm feeling good, and I'm just really excited and feeling really blessed to be here with you.
Nice. So let's get right to it. There's a lot that stands out. Again, there's a lot of important work that you do. There's a lot. I mean, you are important. One thing that inspires me as a writer, right? Six-time published poet, right? When did you know that you was a writer? How did you get into writing, and how did that whole becoming a published author, transpire?
I mean, writing has been a part of pretty much my entire life. The first poem I can remember writing, I was probably about 10 years old, if we can all recall when the Oklahoma City bombing happened.
Mm,
I was so moved by the people that were impacted by that and that had lost their lives to it that I was moved to write this poem for them. And I wrote that in elementary school, and I had won a public speaking award from my school for it. And we did this
nice.
whole tree planting ceremony and everything. So it just kind of started from there, and it just became a way, or a tool rather, that I used to navigate my own experiences and the things that I was absorbing from my environment. So I wrote privately. I kept a lot of it for myself. I didn't really share it with anybody. And when I was about 29 years old, I was going through something emotional at that time as well, a breakup, and I was moving from where I was living in the city back into Queens, Astoria, where I'm from. And I had bumped into this woman in while I was waiting in the lobby, and she needed directions to go downtown to where I was living. And I didn't want her to get lost. So you know how the streets in Queens are, they can be a little confusing, right? Right, So I said, let me walk you to the train, and you'll be fine from there. And during our walk, we had a conversation, and she was telling me why she was going downtown, which was to visit this incredible person that I had the blessing of knowing, Steve Cannon, who was a blind poet, author, novelist, professor, and founder of A Gathering of the Tribes, which is a nonprofit for writers and artists. And she mentioned to me that he was always looking for volunteers because obviously he was blind. So there was
Mm,
a limit to some of the things that he could do. So I figured in my mind, I was inspired when you're going through something, sometimes one of the best things you can do is to extend yourself to others, right? It can take you sort of out of that space and generate a lot of good feelings, right, for yourself and others. So I reached out and I met Steve, and he said part of the deal for me helping him was that I had to read him some of my poetry every week.
Wow.
And I had never really done that before, right? I had kept it all sort of to myself. It was just a very private practice that I had. And so I did. And after hearing some of my poetry, he told me that I had to publish this. And he had a publishing company called Fly By Night Press, and he published my books. And
Nice.
after that, other people started publishing them in their anthologies as well.
Nice. Talk about that right there. You know, what out of all your pieces, because you've been publishing other people's stuff, but you've also written your own books, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite piece, a favorite poem, a favorite book? Is there any favorites like that
Of my own?
of your own? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few. There's one that I really love reading called Stockholm Syndrome,
I
which
love that one.
thank
Love
you,
that.
which is a lot about my experience. And I think a lot of people's experience, one being of a mixed background, is secondly, just how whitewashed a lot of our culture is. So it's definitely speaking a lot on that and just trying to open people's eyes to that. So I love reading that. It's incredibly honest, right? It's the reason why I sort of wrote it was not only to speak on that and bring awareness to it, but also I'm quite aware of the fact that I've been given certain platforms, and with the blessing of that platform, I'm going to try to raise the voices of people like myself and you.
Mm-hmm. Powerful, powerful,
Mm-hmm.
powerful. Is there anything, right? So we've spoken extensively about your time with Steve. You know,
Yes.
aside from him telling you, you know, inspiring you to publish and getting you to actually read to him, what's one of your favorite memories of him?
Oh my God, there's so many.
If you could share one or two, a
Yeah,
couple.
of course. There's so many. I spent so much time with him. He really just the energy that he allowed between him and I. He was one of the very few people I felt where I could be 100% myself.
Mm.
No judgment, no anything. That's just how Steve was. And he was a beautiful connector of people. So he really taught me the beauty in that, in connecting with people from a space of authenticity and not being afraid to be your true self and not hide anymore, right? Because even hiding the poetry, right? That was a part of me hiding my true depth,
Mm.
right? My true thoughts, my true feelings, all of that. And he sort of obliterated that in my life and really cultivated this new sense of confidence.
Mm.
There was a few moments that were great teachers for me. One was I took him to an art exhibit, and of course he's blind, right?
Wow.
So he couldn't visually see anything, but I would explain all of the art pieces that were there that we stopped in front of in detail, right? So it
Wow.
really gave me a new appreciation for how I even look at art,
Mm.
right? And a
Wow.
new appreciation for even the gift of sight, all of these things that we kind of take for granted because our world, our society is built on the luxury of having these gifts,
Mhm.
right? And we sort of take for granted that these things are gifts. So it just brought a new level of gratitude to my life, and also a deeper way of how I could help others.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to your Reiki work. How'd you
Yes.
get into that? How First of all, explain to those who don't know what Reiki is. What is Reiki? And then how'd you
Really,
get
it's
into it?
just energy work, right? Like Reiki is not me necessarily healing you. I'm a conduit for chi energy,
Mm.
for life force energy, right? Your body is doing the healing. Okay. We just have to be attuned to feeling certain blockages, noticing where these things are, but also asking the right questions about what you're already feeling and experiencing so that we know where to kind of focus our energy or make suggestions for you, right? So it's about bringing yourself first. When you first learn Reiki, you've got to do it on yourself first. You can't practice on anybody else in level 1. Right? It's about doing it for yourself. And then you move on to pets and animals, and then you move on to people, right? So you've really got to get really in tune with yourself before you can even start to work with anybody else's energies. So again, like I said, it's working with life force energy, which is constantly around us. If I could simplify it, and I often say this, many of us do it without even realizing we do it. Right? When a kid falls and scrapes their knee, right, or gets a boo-boo, right, what do? We rub it, right? We give them loving care, right? That's energy that we're extending, right, to them. And it often what? Makes them feel better.
Yep.
Right? And we all have the capacity to do this. Nobody owns Reiki. Nobody owns life force energy. Nobody owns chi or any of that. So I think more people would be surprised to realize that they actually practice this incredible healing tool without even realizing that they're doing it.
And how'd you get into it?
I got into it when my mom got sick and was beginning to transition. My cousin is actually a Reiki master as well. And I have this very poignant memory of him because she had cancer in the bile duct. So there was a lot of pain in her stomach area. She had ascites as well. So there was a lot of pain there, and her liver was failing, amongst other things. And he did Reiki on her one day, and her reaction to it. And my mother would have been way more traditionally religious and believed in Western medicine for the most part. And her reaction to it, she couldn't believe how good it felt.
Wow.
To her. So, I mean, it was kind of too late to help her, but it really dove me into wanting to see what this was all about, right? And I had experienced a miscarriage a few years ago, and someone had performed Reiki on me because I was experiencing pain after it had happened in the womb space area, and bleeding and all those other things that come with that unfortunate experience. And the pain had begun to dissipate. So I had seen from a few experiences personally, not just outside of myself, but now within myself, that there was really something to this. Right? There was really something to this, which made me want to dive even further into it and study it myself so that I could offer that to others.
Incredible, great work. What about Reiki, or what about society? Right, 2 parts. What frustrates you about society when it comes to energetic healing, and then on the flip side, what are you excited about?
What frustrates me is the resistance to the fact that it exists. We know that everything is energy, everything is made up of energy. I mean, it's measured, right? It's measured in frequency. We are constantly experiencing it in the matrix way. But for some reason, we've been programmed to believe that healing can come from outside of us, from a pill, with all these other side effects. Like I find that incredibly frustrating when the earth provides everything, and we are of the earth, right?
Absolutely.
We're all one with everything in nature. So we really should believe in our capacity to heal ourselves. Right? We're born with immune systems. We're born with these healing capacities, and we disconnect from ourselves so much, which I think actually makes us more sick.
Yep, I agree.
So I find that so frustrating because I understand, because I lived that, right? I lived in that space, and I found when I was living in that space, my health was so much worse. It was so much worse, right? I was being diagnosed with endometriosis and adenomyosis, and they were telling me to have get my, what do you call that?
Hysterectomy.
A hysterectomy, right? by the time I was like 30 years old.
Mm.
All of these things, right? That's the first thing they want to do, is give you a pill, diagnose you with something, and then there's surgery, right? And thank God I didn't listen to any of that. Instead, what I did under the guidance of one of my dance teachers was begin meditation
Mm.
and focusing on the womb space, and taking herbal supplements that supported that part of my body, right? Something from the earth, and then my breath and my own mind
Mm-hmm.
having the capacity to generate healthy feelings within my body, right? Like all of your cells are made up of energy. There's energy constantly happening in your body. And what you're thinking and telling yourself is going to affect the type of energy that's generating in each of those cells, right? Making them overactive or underactive or distorted, right? And with the power of breath and mind, we can find a much more calmer way of living, which then is going to promote our health, right? What I'm excited about is the fact that I think now more than ever, people are becoming more and more open to it,
Yes.
right? And what I'm also excited about, which I think is more my wavelength of it, is I don't think it necessarily has to look as traditional as some of the ways that we've been taught, right? Like even meditating, and it depends on what works for you. That's the thing. I think there's a lot of freedom in this and finding what works for you, right? It doesn't have to look like what everybody else does. It doesn't necessarily have to look like being completely still for an hour, although there may be days where that's what's called for,
Mm-hmm.
right? There may be other days where it's moving meditation, a walk, or even being completely present when you make a cup of tea, right? All of these other things are available to us. And so I think people are starting to recognize that, in my opinion, we've been lied to.
Mm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a wonderful awakening happening now when it comes to how powerful we truly are, not only within our own bodies and to cultivate health and choose better, but the life that we can create through those choices.
Powerful. If you can remember your first time, I guess practicing Reiki, or even maybe prior, really becoming aware of meditation, what was that like? What was happening in your life? I know you mentioned with Reiki with your mom, but going back before that with meditation, when did that become a thing for you?
When I was in high school, so about 17, close to 18 years old, it was towards the end of high school. And I was having tremendous anxiety, to the point where it was giving me intestinal spasms. I was in a lot of pain. I couldn't stand up or walk straight some
Mm.
days. Um, I was ending up with back spasms. I remember being in the hospital once for it. And it was all due to anxiety and these anxiety attacks that I was having. And because of that, I couldn't keep my composure, even like walking down the hall sometimes in high school. And thankfully, the high school I went to had a counseling program. So I went into the counseling program, and I was blessed to have a counselor that introduced me to breath work.
Mm.
And the first thing was the alternative nostril breathing, right, which balances out the left side and the right side of the brain.
Mhm.
So that was my first experience with breath work. And I ended up not having to take medication for these intestinal spasms, because, of course, right, the first thing you want to do is give you a prescription for something. But through breath work, I was able to leave all of that behind. The intestinal spasms stopped, all of that. So there
Powerful.
really is a lot of truth in it, right? And I've seen that over the course of the last 22 years of my life.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
wanna I wanna ask something, because you mentioned something earlier about us being lied to. How do you think, like, with because these are what you're talking about, these are ancient practices,
That's right.
right? How do you think what caused us, if you can, to lose that connection with ourselves, the earth, and each other?
Well, I think, without getting too political
Yep.
or anything like that, I think demonizing a lot of these practices, like astrology or this, like, demonizing it. So then it became fear, right? Like the
Mm.
whole witch hunt thing, right? Like making it something that was for witches or people that were into, you know, what would be considered lower vibrational things, right? And everything having a focus on making money, right? And when we look at doctors or other authority figures, we're sort of programmed to believe them because
Yep.
they are seen as authority figures, right? We see them as people we can trust with our lives, literally, with
Hmm.
our lives, literally, forgetting that they too are people and
Yep.
make mistakes and they don't know everything, right? I think we need to look more to nature for the truth, because nature is constant and
Mm.
it's constantly flourishing, even in some of its death and demise, right? It's constantly being reborn. It does exactly what it needs to survive. It's not really looking outside of itself, right? And we've been programmed to think that animals and nature and all of this stuff is somehow separate from us, when really it's all related, it's all
Absolutely.
connected. And that comes through programming in schools, right?
Hmm.
Which needs to be revamped, in my opinion, through the capitalistic society that we live in, right?
Hmm.
Pushing certain shots, pushing all of this other stuff, right? That's actually making people sick. I think if people released their programming, which we all know is really difficult, right? And just actually looked at what was happening in front of them, right? And looked at nature, spent more time in nature, they would see
Mm.
the truth.
No, absolutely. You mentioned something that I think I realized that the doctors, the medical system was trash when um the doctor that's supposed to be
Yeah.
treating someone who I loved was outside smoking a cigarette, eating McDonald's. I was like, wait,
Yeah.
that's gonna make you sick, very sick. And then I realized that maybe you're already sick. So how can I go to someone for healing if they're sick themselves?
Right.
Right. And for me, that's what it was for me, like years ago. That was like, wow, like this thing is a sham.
Right.
This whole
And I had a similar experience during a doctor's visit with my mom, um, because I had visited a holistic biomedical center in Mexico during this time and sat with nutritionists, and they were doing all herbal formulas, tea tonics, a lot of Chinese medicine. And upon returning after the things that I had learned there, my mom's doctor here, which would have been a Western style
Mhm.
doctor, was trying to basically say that there was nothing they could really do for her liver failing
Mm.
or not being in optimal health. And I had asked him about certain herbs that we know are meant to support the liver, like milk thistle, right? Just for one, right? And I asked him specifically, like, what if I gave her some of this? Would this sort of help support the liver even just a little, right? And he had the nerve to tell me to my face that it doesn't do anything.
Wow.
But
Wow.
what he ended up giving her made her more sick, and she died a week and a half after the first dose. So
Mm.
it just proved to me that a lot of these doctors are limited in their training and education.
No, 100%. You see, you know what happens? One thing that happens is that everybody can be conditioned, right? So no matter what level you're at, if you're only learning through a certain lens, that's all you know.
That's right.
Right? That's all you know, and it might be accurate. Like your knowledge might be accurate through that lens, but we know that there's a greater scope. We know that there people have been ill before, and they have
That's
been
right.
healed. So that's why the work that you're doing is important. Even taking that trip to the biomedical center, to do as much as you could at that time to help your mom. And definitely my
Mhm.
condolences.
Thank you.
Always and once again for that. But thank you
Mhm.
for going to learn, because I think one thing you said, just in general, since knowing you, is that although maybe you couldn't fully save your mom, what you learned allowed you to help yourself and has allowed you to help many others, and will allow you to continue to help others
That's
as
right.
long as you continue to be on your journey, right?
That's right.
So
That's
thank you
right.
for
And it's
just
one of my mottos, right? And I know you know it, right? Like your
mm,
mess can become your magic.
mm,
And I think the things that we go through, whether or not we're able to, like I said, help right in that particular moment, like I couldn't necessarily save my mom. But it's now the knowledge and the
yep,
experience has now become the medicine that I can gift to other people, right? That's the gift in the entire experience. that I went through is one, what it propelled me to get more into with studying and practicing, and helping myself. But now I get to share some of this knowledge and some of this experience with other people so that they can hopefully help themselves. And it's like a domino effect. It'll just keep going and going and going and going.
Now, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
Right. Knowledge of healing is the gift that keeps on giving. So I want to stay here talking about healing, right? So we spoke about Reiki. I want to get to sound, right? I have a book in my library called Vibrational Medicine. So again, it is an ancient technique that we heal through sound, right? When did you know, right, coming from a Latin background, coming from an indigenous background, was it always in you, right? And how did not just music, right, not just the love of music, but understanding that music can heal you, music can alter your mood, not just your mood, but music can actually physically heal you. How did you come into that knowledge?
Oh God, there's so many different experiences, right? One, definitely through dance. I was in a hip hop dance crew for like a few years. So, and I was going through it. I was going through it through that time, but I found whenever I was there, right, it was like church. Everything else didn't exist. And I was just in bliss, right? So that I started to make the connection there, right? But I don't think I fully realized it until, again, the experience with my mom was so powerful. Right. She was having a lot of trouble sleeping. And all of this was in a 6-week period, right? Her getting sick and then passing away. So it all kind of came very quickly. She was having a lot of insomnia, which was not only, I'm sure, her fear of what was happening to her, but also a byproduct of some of like her liver and her kidney and stuff shutting down. Because part of what I did was I dove into reading medical journals and sort of putting her symptoms side by side to try to figure out what was going on and how I could help her. So I started playing sound frequencies for her at night so that she could try to relax and sleep even just a little bit, because she did need rest, right? Our bodies do need rest for certain periods of time to restore, to rejuvenate, and all that, even for our brains, right? So I started trying that with her. And that would work a bit, right? And then for myself, after a verbally abusive relationship and miscarriage, I found that listening to those frequencies was one of the things that really got me through it. Where I was able to breathe and just listen. And if I needed to cry, because sometimes with sound frequencies, it will bring out the things that are stuck in our nervous system to be released. So I started to see it through my own experience, and learning that this was helping me through it dove me into wanting to learn how to do it so that I could then extend it to other people.
Nice. One thing that's powerful, I don't remember when or where I was when I came into this knowledge, but we are instruments, right? We have a voice box, we have eardrums, we have a heartbeat, we have vital organs, right? We are instruments. And so music absolutely has the power to heal us. If you can name some of the frequencies that you listen to, because there are tons, there's 98 hertz, there's 432 hertz, right? There's a lot of them out there. Which ones did you listen to? And which ones would you recommend?
Well, I guess it really depends on what you're going through, right? And where you want to focus on. I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, the 432 was extremely helpful for me, right? Like when we're focusing on heart chakra work, right? Because I was experiencing tremendous heartbreak. So I would recommend for anybody looking into what to sort of listen to. What are you going through, right? Are you experiencing a lot of over mental activity, right? Then you're going to want to look at the frequency for, your third eye, right? If you're having trouble speaking your truth, then we're going to want to focus on like the throat chakra frequency, right? And each chakra is related to a particular note, but there's so much information even online. Like you don't have to go anywhere for this. You can research it on YouTube and it'll come up for you, right? Just look at what is it that you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then based on that, you'll know exactly which frequency to work with. I think most people sort of like the 432. It's one of the singing bowls that I work with a lot, even in the grief support group, right? Because heartbreak,
Mm-hmm.
right? Grief comes with a lot of heartbreak. We store a lot of that right here. So I try to always use that in an effort to sort of remove the blockages that are happening there. It's one of my favorites.
Powerful. So let's go right there. Talk about the sound bowl work.
Mhm.
You have a
Oh,
couple
sorry,
again.
not to interrupt you, but
Go ahead.
also the other one I really love, because I think in our society, especially when we live in like major cities like New York, where we're constantly bombarded with sound, we can feel really all over the place and not really grounded. So doing like root chakra 396,
Mm-hmm.
I think will be particularly helpful if you find yourself feeling like a bit scattered that way. Getting grounded is super, super important for everybody. If your root chakra is messed up, the rest of them are messed up. And it can affect so many things, like even sexual pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it can affect so many things. So definitely work with heart and root on a frequent basis, just as a recommendation. But definitely just think about what it is that you're going through before you make that choice. But I think they're all helpful.
They are. They are. They are.
Mhm.
So again, let's go to the singing bowls, right?
Yes.
So how'd you go from, what was the process going from putting the sounds on YouTube or any other, listening platform to saying, you know what, let me get my own bowls, let me learn, let me practice, and let me get my own bowls and implement this. How did that transpire for you?
I think it was just sort of divine intervention, really. I had been gifted a drum from my dad, a native drum. So, and I had played instruments as a kid, like piano and fife and other things. So, instruments had always sort of been like a part of my life anyway, to some
Mhm.
degree. Um, and like you said, using your body and your voice, right? Your voice is incredibly heart opening, and I sing all the time at home. If I had a better voice, my life would be a musical and I would just do everything. But the drum I would try using in my poetry at first, and I just found myself noticing where I felt it in the body when I would, right? And I knew that there was something to that. So I decided to just start doing some research. Like, how could I learn how to really do this, right? And learn to do it properly, not just, whatever. Really learn from people who were actually doing the work and
Mhm.
actually doing the work like for others. So I was a follower online. Of course, a lot of people know Deepak Chopra,
Mhm.
and there's one of his residents, Jackie Cantwell, who I had started following online from seeing one of her sessions. And I just thought she was amazing. And I bumped into her in the street
Yep.
accidentally at a poetry reading in Brooklyn one day. I
Mhm.
was going to perform, and then I see this woman walking down the street, and I'm just like, I know her. That's got to be her. So I went up to her, and yes, it was her.
Mhm.
And through connecting with her even more deeply, I saw that she was extending a teaching course that she was going to be doing. And I just figured there are way too, I don't believe in coincidences. I was like, there's just too much synchronicity here for me not to make this connection. One, for the path that I had been on, trying to do it with my mom, even if it was just through playing it, doing it for myself through playing it. And now I follow her online and I think she's great at what she does. And now I'm meeting her in person
Mm.
by some divine chance. Like, there's something here for me,
Mhm.
and I just felt a calling to do it. And it was and has been one of the best experiences of my life so far.
Powerful. How do people react to the sound baths? And before
Yeah.
before how people react, which bowls do you have? I know you mentioned that a little while ago. The frequencies that you have. Why do you have them? What do they do? And then how do people react?
Okay, well, I always bring three ones in particular: one for the root, one for the heart, and one for the third eye. um Once again, getting grounded, super important, right? To just feel secure within ourselves. Our root chakra is the base for our feeling of stability and security in life, feeling like our needs can be met, which is something I think we all struggle with sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? So getting grounded first so that we can feel safe in our own bodies, right? And then the heart chakra, because blockages in the heart chakra, right? Like your heart chakra is like right in the middle of the other one. So if there's a blockage there, the other ones are going to be more tightly wound, right? Like our chakras are not just our energy centers, but they're also part of the reason why we die,
Wow.
right? The more tightly wound they are, the less life force we end up having. So if we can work to release them a little bit, we can actually promote longevity in life, right? And I find, again, we know even physically our hearts are incredibly important, right? In a multitude of ways. So anything to sort of help with the heart space, I just like to focus on that area. And then one, overthinking. How many of us overthink all the time? Right? So many of us are stuck up here all the time. We can't see or think clearly, right? So I like to try to get a balance between groundedness, open-heartedness, open-mindedness, which I think will then cultivate the space for the rest of them to operate optimally.
Powerful. Before we move on, do you have a favorite instrument?
In general, or that I
In,
use?
in general, well, that you use, and then in general, if it's not the same, and then
Okay.
why is that instrument your favorite?
Okay. I mean, I love my sound bowls. I love my sound bowls just because I feel like not even just like for myself the way that they feel, but the peace and positive feelings that I've been able to give other people
Hmm.
just by playing them. You know, people that can't relax, I've put them to sleep
Yeah,
with
you
it,
do. Yeah, you
right?
do.
Right. And so I love the fact that I'm able to bring that to people's lives when they need it, right? Just recently in the grief support group, I did a little bit longer of a sound meditation this time, focusing on cultivating joy and with everybody's eyes closed, because I'm never really trying to do anything. I'm always trying to observe what the people there need,
Mm,
right? And how they're reacting to specific sounds,
hmm.
right? And to see the smiles on some of their faces,
Hmm.
right? Like lets me know that they're responding really, really well to this. Or even if there's tears and release happening, that's what needs to happen there,
Hmm.
right? So it's doing its job. Or if somebody's really anxious and they feel really scared or something, if I can put them to sleep for 15 minutes, they've reached a certain level of relaxation where that anxiety has sort of been put to the side or removed for a bit, right? So that's incredibly rewarding for me. My favorite instrument in general is the violin.
Okay. Why?
I just love the way it sounds. I love everything about the way it sounds. String instruments like the violin or the cello brings me that kind of peace and
Nice.
relaxation. It has my whole life. I tried playing the violin when I was like 8. That didn't really last very long, but I love the sound of it. I just think it's so beautiful.
Powerful, powerful.
Mhm.
Oh, no, thank you for that. So let's move on to something a little deeper, right? Let's move on. You're a Puerto Rican woman,
Yeah.
Latin woman, family from Puerto Rico. You're doing work in Puerto Rico, the chair of the nonprofit Women in Need PR.
Mhm.
How, for Battered Women, how'd you get into that work? Why'd you start? Why are you doing that work in Puerto Rico?
Okay, there's a lot.
Talk about it.
My own experiences with abusive relationships. I was in a number of verbally abusive relationships from the age of 19. Um, that were a tremendous attack on my self worth, and that I allowed to some degree, right? And I was in a repetitive pattern with them until the miscarriage thing happened. And I just felt like enough was enough,
Mm,
right? Enough was enough. And speaking on that issue. And I had been doing work with women before that, but that was really, I think, the what do they say, the straw that broke the camel's back or what have you.
mm,
And I had been doing like writing workshops in women's shelters, like up in Harlem and things like that, green home services for women. So I had begun doing it there, right? Again, using our voice and using writing, because I think our voice, as you mentioned earlier, right, not only being an instrument, but a powerful tool for healing and speaking our truth, which many women, I think, have been silenced. I think women in general are taught and bred to absorb experiences constantly, as if that's what we're supposed to do, and to be quiet, right? But we too have voices, and we have the power to use them, right? To bring awareness to this issue, to empower others with it. And so I no longer believe in inheriting silence anymore. And so after that experience, a good friend of mine, Faina, under a conversation with me, decided to move to Puerto Rico. And she knows a lot of the work that I had done previously with women in that capacity. And she had this idea of opening a center for women there, not a shelter, not just, like we know shelters here don't really do the best of work all the time, but really, like, how do we create systemic change for it? How do we stop the cycles of abuse, right? And so she came to me with that, and asked me if I would be the chair of it, and help, knowing the work that I was doing, not only for myself, my experiences. It allowed me, and I think she saw this in me too, was that I was somebody who could show up from a place of authenticity because I had experienced similar things to them. And I think that's a really powerful thing, is when you can meet somebody from a space of understanding what that trauma is like. Because that trauma isn't just like, oh, it hurts my feelings. It actually affects your brain. It can affect your heart. It can produce miscarriages. There's so many things that abuse actually does to your body, right? And I think not everybody understands how deep a lot of that trauma really goes. Unless, like I said, when you've experienced it, the working through that trauma was really hard. I was in the depths of depression with it. I had insomnia for about a year and a half. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I isolated myself. There was a lot of suicidal ideation and almost considering it, right? So getting myself out of that place through these practices, like, how could I not? How could I not show up for other women and show them that even though some of their experiences may be far more physical or nearly fatal than some of the things I had experienced, how could I not show up to show them that it's possible? Right? I felt like it was my duty to, and I felt like it all of a sudden made sense why I went through the things that I went through. It all made sense. It made very clear the purpose of why I had gone through that. And almost to a point, sometimes subconsciously chose it, right? Through a lack of self-love, and a lack of seeing myself clearly from the time of 19 years old, right? I remember a relationship at 19 years old where I was constantly called really, really terrible names, thrown out of the car, other women all the time. And that was a repetitive cycle till I was, 36 years old, right? When was I going to change that? And I did, right? And now, because I was able to change it, I just felt like it was my duty to show up and to give a voice to those other women, to show them that they can get out of it too. And since then, I've even helped women leave marriages that they've been in that have been abusive. Women I've met online that I've never even met in person, that have reached out to me simply because I have chosen to speak on it, to post about it, to create videos about it, and to do the partnership that I have with Women in Need PR.
Oh, powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So let's stay here. Why, if you can speak, why do you think the abuse happens, right? So you obviously, you've been around men, you have a father, you have brothers, you've been in a relationship, you have male friends. Why do you think so many men, not that your family has been, but why do you think there are so many men that abuse women? And then why do you think there are so many women who stay in abusive relationships?
I think there's a multiple amount of reasons, and I don't ever like to presume that anybody's like a villain or a victim, right? I think sometimes these terms are overused.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think sometimes it comes from what we see at
Mm-hmm.
home, right? Like some of the people that I had that experience with, their parents had that kind of relationship,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that from the mothers telling me, right, that their partner had called them names, derogatory names, um, or abused them sexually or things like that. Or there was a lot of infidelity or whatever. A lot of our patterns in relationships come from upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
right? They come from what we see, right? Children do as you do, not as you say,
Yep.
right? So unfortunately, and I have compassion for them in that aspect, that I think that it's their conditioning with men. Some don't love themselves, so it's seen as like an opportunity for power,
Mm-hmm.
right? And society has bred that in itself, right? Seeing that men are supposed to go and soy the royal oats or whatever, and they're meant to conquer women. Even that whole idea of conquering anything
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to meeting in partnership is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? The way that women and particular groups of women are more over sexualized than other groups of women is a problem. Like this is a society problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's perpetuated further and more deeply ingrained in the home,
Mm-hmm.
right? And with women, I think, and I can namely just speak for myself, right? You know, one being Hispanic, being from one of the most over sexualized groups of women, right? We're sort of taught and conditioned to be pleasant all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? To remain quiet, to be the nurturer, to constantly provide, constantly extend ourselves at the sacrifice of ourselves, right? All this whole, you don't put your dirty laundry out there in the street, right? We're constantly breeding this air of silence. And I think because we're taught to sort of be seen and not heard most of the time, we don't speak up on our needs. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're taught not to speak up on our needs, we're taught self betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're taught self-betrayal at home, how is that not going to show itself in our relationships going forward in life? We've been taught that in order to get our needs met, and in order to be accepted, and in order to maintain peace and harmony, that equals betrayal. That
Wow.
equals denying our needs, and that whole mindset needs to stop.
Wow. 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 If we could go a little deeper, right? You mentioned the fact that a lot of the abuse stems from people, and seeing it growing up. What do you think is the root of it, though? Because it had to start somewhere. What do you think is the root of it? Like why it happens in general?
I mean, I think it's generational trauma. I think this is something that goes further and further back, right? Like if we even look at some of the cultures of where we come from,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if we're talking, let's say for myself, right? Hispanic and Taino Indian, right? Like our people were raped, right? Think about it. Like the women were raped. Okay. So we're already coming energetically from a space of being dishonored, defiled, seen as less than, right? So a lot of this is perpetuated, I think, energetically and subconsciously, right? On what we allow. We're carrying that trauma, right, with us, those behaviors like with us almost. And I don't think a lot of us even realize that. And like I said, culturally, right, in this society that we live in, this doesn't just go back to, okay, my parents, what about grandparents, great great grandparents, so on and so on and so on, right? Like it's so complicated that I don't think you can necessarily pinpoint one place where it comes from. But I think we need to understand that this probably goes back way further than we even think. And it has to come that we come from a peoples that were subjected to inhumane violence, especially when it came to our women.
Thank you. What do you think in society? Like, what again? Similar question to earlier. What frustrates you about the work around abuse, battered women, domestic violence? What's not being done, and what more needs to happen?
I think we need to speak more on it. I think people are so uncomfortable with it. And they're so uncomfortable to maybe look at themselves and see how disrespectful they too are to women,
Mm.
right? Without even realizing it. Like some people don't think they're being abusive when they're actually being emotionally abusive or mentally abusive, or even like some of the things where we're constantly calling women bitches or calling them hoes. This is abuse. This is abuse. It's degrading language used for women, and everybody thinks it's fine. Even some women calling women bitches.
I was about to say that because one of
Yeah.
the issues I have is when
Mm-hmm.
when I encourage brothers to stop using that word, which I do all the time, they say,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, women call themselves that," and it's like, and my argument is like, well, just because someone disrespects themselves, don't mean you should.
That's right.
But it's so tough.
That's right. We need to be more
Mm-hmm.
intentional about the words that we use. Language is incredibly powerful, right? We need to re-examine how we speak about ourselves, how we speak to one another, what is being made okay through music, through colloquial language. Like none of this is okay, right? It's not okay to even call men some of the things that we call them, and to put them down either, right? If we're constantly putting down men, what kind of energy are we breeding in them either? And how are they then going to show up in relationship if that's what we're doing to them too, right? Like part of the work that we do in Women in Need PR is not just solely for women. Yes, the focus is that, right? And teaching them holistic ways of healing themselves, but we also have a men's circle every Thursday.
Nice.
Right? Because in order to create real change, you've got to get it from both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Empower your men, right? Empower your men feeling good about themselves, let them rise to the occasion, right? And empower your women and let them rise to the occasion. And then you will have two empowered groups of people meeting each other from an empowered space.
Powerful.
Right? Like I think the whole idea of feminism has been skewed to this man-hating thing when that's not really what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think we need to just zoom out a little bit instead of it making like us against them, but like how do we really heal one another through love, right? And through empowerment, instead of it meaning, like I said before, that one group of people is the villain and one group of people is the victim. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. So I think we need to reshape the conversations we're having around domestic violence and who we're reaching out to in order to help with those situations. I think men need to be more included in that as well, because they're in pain also. That's part of why this is happening. They're in pain also, right? So we can't forget about our brothers either. You know what I mean? They're hurting too, right? So if we can reshape the dialogue that's happening, have more authentic and open spaces for this stuff instead of there still being this taboo and shame around it. People are almost embarrassed to talk about it, right? Like, or even people don't talk about miscarriages and things like this. And all of this is real life stuff,
Yeah.
right? That needs to be addressed. So we need more spaces created, more open dialogue, and reshaping the dialogue that happens, and not just looking to shelter somebody for a little bit to let them go, but are we providing them with the tools necessary to change the pattern in their lives for the long term? And are we getting this these tools and this dialogue, of course, age appropriate, right, with our younger children so that they then can stop the pattern even younger, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of children, I was going to ask,
Mm.
why are you excited and how important is it for you to work with young people?
Because I think that's where a lot of the patterns set in, right? That's where a lot of where we're developing our sense of ego at a certain age. We're developing our sense of empathy, right? Between the up until 12 years old, right? And
Mhm.
up until 12 years old, if you're exposed to certain things, right, you can then become hypersexual or whatever, getting yourself into situations you normally wouldn't, right? So if we can give kids tools to transmute and alchemize some of these experiences, because we can't protect them from everything all of the time, but we can give them the tools to help themselves, right? So if we can get them really young, we're going to empower them younger. They're going to be able to learn the word no and
Mm.
learn their boundaries much younger, right? Which a lot of us are not taught boundaries very young, right? We're forced to hug people and whatever else, even though we don't want to, right?
Mhm.
So I think teaching children their own autonomy and tools like meditation and tools like using their voice and
Mhm.
speaking their truth is going to be tremendous for stopping a lot of the things that we're seeing happening with our young people.
No, absolutely powerful.
Mhm.
Um, Real quick, we got a few minutes left.
Okay.
What do you have coming up that excites you? I know you have a lot going on. You have some big
I
things
do.
coming up, in the next few days, next few weeks. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that in about 2 3 minutes if you can.
Sure. I have a yoga and sound healing session happening at Urban Vegan Roots. If anybody is in the Queens area, please come through. There's brunch. It is, um, we're pushing for alcohol free. So there's a mocktail involved in that, where there'll be 30 minutes of yoga. And then I'll do a quick little talk on the astrology of what's happening around that time, as well as then facilitating a 30-minute sound bath for everybody. I'm also going to be giving away healing gift bags at an event on June 10th that you as well are taking part of, which is an anti-violence movement. And the second part of that will be in July. So yeah, I'm looking forward to those three major things right now.
Nice. Um, you have so much going on.
I do.
How important in 1 minute is collaboration? Because all of those things that you're talking about that's coming up is about partnership and collaboration. How important is that to you?
Collaboration is everything. I have found in my life that some of the greatest things that I have done, and the things that have felt the best and also done the best, right, have actually had the most return, whether through feeling or anything else, the most success have been when I have built it with other people or collaborated with other people. One, no man is an island, right?
Mhm.
You can't do everything yourself. And everybody has a gift to give
Yep.
that can make something even bigger, right? So if you really want to create like positive change and have the most outreach, how do you think that's going to happen? Through more people being involved,
Hmm.
right? Like you don't have to do it alone, right? We all have resources that we can extend to one another. Everything is really, what's really going to change things for us is if we redevelop our sense of community and collaboration, and we've lost that. And that's the issue, right? If we can regain our sense of community, that's only going to empower one another. It's going to generate more feelings of safety when we know we have a bigger support group, a bigger support system, right? And we can support each other in our growth instead of trying to compete all the time. We don't have
No.
to do that. Let's collaborate. You may have an idea that I can build upon, and vice versa. You may need a skill that I have, and vice versa. And then we can create this beautiful thing together that's going to help even more and more people instead of just trying to do it all by ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that.
You're
30
welcome.
seconds to 45 seconds. Give some lasting words for our audience.
Lasting words. Please use your voice.
Mm.
Use your voice, speak your truth. Your voice can impact a star millions and millions and millions and millions of miles away. That's how powerful it is. So please do not be afraid to speak your truth. Whatever you're going through, reach out to somebody. You know, you could even reach out to me if you're experiencing any of the things that I've mentioned. Please don't be afraid to, or someone like Sugar Ray who helps a lot of people as well. Use your voice, speak on it, because people can find their power through your truth.
Mm.
And that's the beauty in it, right? Like sometimes somebody just needs to hear somebody else speak on it for them to feel motivated and empowered to make that change within themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Yo, 2 Feathers, we got to bring you back for part two. We didn't get into the astrology. You have so much more. Thank you again, for being a
Thank you.
guest on the Sugar Ray Show. Deeply appreciate it. I think that this episode will benefit many people, men and women, young and old, all different backgrounds.
Thank you so much
So
for having me.
thank you so much. Of course, yo, everybody, man. Again, this is your boy, your host, Luciann Sugar Ray Marston. We're here with the Sugar Ray Show. Our wonderful, esteemed, incredible, powerful, loving guest, Luciann Berrios, aka 2Feathers, dropped us with a dope interview. Be sure to tune in. Be sure to watch in full. Be sure to share with your loved ones. And remember, as she said, use your voice. Reach out to someone who you know, someone who you love, someone who loves you, maybe a stranger even sometimes. Till next time, peace.